the first piece of news that drops at the beginning of this, though, and I wanted to highlight this. He went and saw The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which is a Neil Gaiman book, and it's adapted for stage. And he said, and since we are talking theater, one of the meetings I had in London was with Dominic and Duncan, the director and scriptwriter of our own stage play, the one we've been working on for the past few years. Originally, we were calling it Harrenhal, but we have now settled on The Iron Throne as the title until we think of something better. Regardless, things are coming well, I think, and we are hopeful to be able to open in late 2024, maybe, but you never know. There's still a lot of work to be done. If this were to open in late 2020, even early 2025, that'd be insane. But folks, last episode, we were just talking about the Night of Laventry and Tourney Harrenhal. This is the play where George is going to give answers. He said this is going to tell the real story of the Tourney of Harrenhal. This could be humongous.
I know. I'm so down. You and I are going to go like fly to see it.
Oh, if it's in London, I'm there. It's happening.
I don't know about London.
Yeah,
it's the United Kingdom.
You're out.
Okay.
That's a podcast.
Maybe I can get there by boat. I mean, I can take it. Well, I don't know, man. There's Titanic. I'm a history guy. You can't. I ain't taking a boat over there either. We're gonna have to figure some way to get me over there. But yeah. Anyway, that's from earlier. For people who are just gonna be watching this as a YouTube video, I had a terrible experience with British Airways once. Anyway, yeah, I mean, thoughts on it being a play. I still have always gone back and forth about this as a play, where it's like, God, man, this would make such an amazing like series. You know, it would be like the alt thing. But you know what I think George is going for here? I think he's going for his EGOT. All right, because a play is like the best way to get that, because he's already got Emmys. Does he have? He doesn't have an Oscar, does he?
He loves working on stage productions. He actually worked on a stage production of Beauty and the Beast with Roy DeTroyce, who is the guy who did the audiobooks for A Song of Ice and Fire. That's how him and Roy became best friends. So I think he just wants to tell a story in that medium. I think he's just like chomping at the bit. Plus, he's a huge fan of Shakespeare. That's kind of obvious whenever you read A Song of Ice and Fire. But I think he just wants to express himself in another way. I love this idea personally. I think it's a great story for the stage, even.
Yeah, because obviously he has Emmys, right? Mm-hmm. But if you write a play that wins a Tony, then he's only 2 away, and it's easy because then you just make a movie, and a Game of Thrones movie could totally win an Oscar. And then you just need one song to get a Grammy and you're in, and then you're the exclusive EGOT winners. That's like, I think only like 10 people have ever even done it. It's like ultra rare.
I would love that for George. I would also like him just to write the books.
Well, I mean that too. Yeah. EGOT winners. There's been like 12. Yeah, that's it.
Well, maybe George will be the unlucky 13th.
Yeah, could be. So he continues on here in his blog post here. He talked about that. He said, I also found a little time to meet with my British publisher and my other British publisher to talk wild cards and A Song of Ice and Fire, and of course, The Winds of Winter.
Yes, this piece of news is making waves right now online. Met with a British publisher for The Winds of Winter. And the reason why this is significant is because a lot of the times books will actually release in Britain first. I see this all the time happen with a lot of my favorite authors. Now, do I think Winds of Winter would drop there before America? Probably not. But they may have more parameters to get things rolling sooner. This is significant. This is not a routine thing where it's like George has to check in with the publishers every year or anything like that. This is a specific conversation. And I do know that, obviously it says wild cards and A Song of Ice and Fire, and of course The Winds of Winter. And people feel like maybe that is tacked on, but I believe that he saved the best for last here. And wild cards is kind of a whole nother project and with his publisher. So he's going to have to talk about these things. He's on contract for them. But these are 3 contracted things. I mean, Song of Ice and Fire and Winds of Winter are pretty much like fairly similar, right? I imagine the Song of Ice and Fire is probably more like table, coffee table books. But if he is talking about the publisher about the Winds of Winter, this is like what is that conversation he's having, right? Like, what is that? Is it as simple as them going, "Hey, how's Winds?" And he goes, "Not good." Maybe. But why
Could
mention
be.
that in a update?
Yeah, it's very interesting because first he says and a song of Ice and Fire, because there is a book he does have coming out, which is it's like a Game of Thrones cookbook, which he actually in another post revealed stuff from, and it's literally like the same one.
Yeah,
But it's like now a Game of Thrones one as opposed to like a cookbook of Ice and Fire or whatever, Feast of Ice and Fire. But so he also says a Song of Ice and Fire. So the only book we know outside of the Winds of Winter, if he's including that as something else, is the second part, Fire and Blood Part 2, which I would imagine would also get a like Rise of the Dragon thing. Remember, which actually is Fire and Blood, but it's in that World of Ice and Fire big book format. So I would imagine that he's probably talking about that as well. So
Duncan Egg novellas. I mean, that really leaves the door open for many a thing. But the Winds of Winter is mentioned by, like, he could have kept that in A Song of Ice and Fire, but he specifically included at the end, of course, the Winds of Winter. Talking to his publisher, I mean, this is significant.
So he continues in the next line here, and he says, and of course, I spent 3 days with House of the Dragon. He got to see a studio where House of the Dragon is being shot. He said, I originally planned to go months ago, but of course there was the writer's strike, and instead I stayed in Santa Fe working on the Winds of Winter. And then he sort of goes on a little bit too, and he talks about, I was able to visit Game of Thrones sets and things like that. And then there's more, we'll get to it too, where he talks about the 3rd and 4th season of House of the Dragon, which is crazy because they said there might only be 3. Now it's sort of confirmed potentially that we are getting 4, I would imagine, with the success of it. I don't know that you could do 5. We talked about that.
No.
I feel
Four
like
max. 4 might be
max.
a 4 to 6 episode.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of a big deal too, because they had said previously it might only be 3 seasons, which to me it was like, okay, I could see it in 3. We were nervous of like how there's no way you could stretch this to like 5 or 6. It's just not. There's just not enough content. If anything, season 1 actually is a lot of the stretching of filling space. So yeah, I mean, he brings up again, I was working on Winds, right?
Well, here's the interesting thing. We covered that fact that he was on that interview with Bernard Cornwell. What was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago? And he said, working on the Winds of Winter, I have 100 pages left. And we said, well, he meant to say hundreds.
Maybe he.
What if he really meant 100?
100.
Yeah. What if he really meant 100? Because he did. If you look at the closed captioning, he says 100.
Yeah.
So
if it is 100, then we're not far off.
I mean, no, we're cooking with gas, man. Like,
right.
And even then, him speaking to his publisher about it, because I guarantee you the publisher asks George about every 6 months if he's done, and he just leaves it on red. He's like, I'm not responding to these people.
Right. I'm sure.
And for him to go and fly to London, and also just a lot of things happening right here, right? Like going and meet with the playwrights, going and then meeting his publisher. Like this was a business trip for sure, with a lot of aspects. But it seems like it's kind of centered around this small 2-line Winds of Winter update. If anything, I think it makes me hopeful.
Well, there might be a little pressure on him to finish now, because George has actually a chance here to right a wrong that or certainly something he doesn't feel bad about. Because if I'm George and I'm sitting there, like the books, obviously we want them and everything, but like the show came and went, right? The show came and went. I think Duncan Egg is going to be huge. I think Duncan Egg might be bigger than House of the Dragon, and I think it has a shot to be. I mean, it's hard to say something could be as big as a Game of Thrones, but it'll be like a new generation, really, when that show comes out, because it'll be 2025. Will be, 7 years removed, right? Yeah. 20. Yeah. So I mean, you're talking a good amount of time in between there. And maybe he doesn't want Dunk and Egg to go the same way that Game of Thrones went, where he still has to finish those books, and those are shorter. So,
Very good point.
you know, I mean, let's say Dunk and Egg gets its 3 seasons, which would take us up to the end. I mean, thankfully there is some content in the back that we know how the story is going to kind of end, but we still don't really have a lot of that middle stuff. So with that, you're talking, let's say 2025 is season 1, 2027, 2029 would be season 3, and then you'd be out of content. And George is not getting any younger. Like he might not even live that long. I mean, you know, knock on wood, obviously, but I mean, he's in his 70s, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you are right. And the fact that part of this update was A Song of Ice and Fire, that absolutely could include some Duncan Egg novellas.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever been like, since A Dance with Dragons, I don't know if I've been this excited for like book stuff. Like this is
to me, it was during COVID when he gave the huge update, and he like sort of outlined, like, I worked on this chapter and this chapter and this chapter, and it was like, whoa, because that was like the
it
biggest
felt real.
update.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Felt very real. I think this is all encouraging stuff. And for him to open up a dialogue willingly with the publisher and be there in person, this isn't a phone call or an email. This is him going in person. I don't know. It just kind of feels like a big deal to me.
Yeah,
But
I don't think he'd go there. I mean, obviously he went maybe it was because he went to see the House of the Dragon set and is like, hey, I'm over there. Like, I'll go have a meeting with them too. But it almost feels more so like he went to go do that, right? Because he would have been there for the House of the Dragon like party, like season 2 wrap party.
Yeah. It's interesting at the very least, right? And we could either take it as a negative thing where it's like, oh, he mentioned the when's the winner to them in a sentence and they said, okay, cool. Or we could be positive about it and say, hey, this might be an indicator that we're closer than we thought. It doesn't cost us money either way to do so. So I'm going to go with today, I'm going to go with being positive. I think this is a good sign. And I'll tell you what, 100% is a good sign. All the stuff he said about House of the Dragon.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm going to continue on here too. Cause so he did talk about that. The fact that he said they're talking 3 and 4, which we talked a little bit. It says these were lively, fun discussions and we got some good work done. Those 2 days, though 2 days was not nearly enough. There's so much ground to cover. I'm not sure 20 days would have been enough. And here he is in front of a heart tree, you know, just cool photo. The highlight of the trip had to be the sneak preview that Ryan gave me the first 2 episodes of House of the Dragon season 2. Rough cuts, of course. Of course, I'm hardly objective when talking about anything based on my own work, but I have to say, I thought both episodes were just great, even if they aren't finished yet. Dark, mind you, very dark. They may make you cry. I did not cry myself, but one of my friends did. Powerful, emotional, gut-wrenching, heart-rendering, just the sort of thing I like. What can I say? I was weaned on space here. So, I mean, you know, you can mark this next territory as spoilers. So if you want to click off, not listen, because
We are going to spoil Fire and Blood and season 2.
And yeah, so because I think we need to go into spoiler territory, but I do want to give people a chance. We are going to talk about spoilers for a second. Mute whatever you want to do. Jimmy, because you and I have talked a little bit about this, but we've been kind of spoiler protectory. You know, we've been protecting the spoilers. So now let's dive into it here. Blood and cheese, man. How do we think it's going down?
I mean, we see a clip of it in the trailer. We literally see Helena with her head like back and what I presume to be one of the men doing the deed. Man. Also, the scars on Helena's face in the trailer are from Blood and Cheese, I think.
I think Blood and Cheese is going to be worse than the Red Wedding.
I could see it that way because it's involving children.
It's gonna open a season. To me, Blood and Cheese might be one of the most brutal and hardcore, like just pain. Like it's man,
Here's
it's
a question.
Like it's
Here's a question.
to me, it might literally be the hardest like thing to read. And go ahead with your question. Yeah.
Well, no. I was going to ask you though. Do you feel like audiences nowadays are a little bit more desensitized to these things? Because not just because of the red wedding being done, but then people trying to imitate it in television and other media. But then also on the fact that social media shows us terrible things happening every single day. Do you feel like maybe it'll have a little bit of a lesser impact?
No, I don't. The question is going to be though, like, it's at the end of the day, like Game of Thrones is obviously like R-rated, and but there's still kind of a thing we just don't see very often in any media, which is like killing of kids. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like it's still, even in like the most gruesome stuff, it's pretty rare that you get something where you would show like a little kid's like throat getting slit or
Yeah.
something. So I've talked about this with this scene, and I think dramatically you have a really, like, where's the camera angle gonna be on it? I would imagine the way I would do it, and I think to give it like the most powerful effect is I would have the camera on Helena's face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would have like, you see the shadow of it going down. Because remember, the whole deal is they ask, like, which son do you want to die? And then they kill the other one, right?
Yeah.
So then it's like, so she's left with this possible, and they've really built her up to be this sort of like sweet character that, you know, she doesn't want anything to do with war. Like, she's just like a happy go lucky, you know, kind of
I mean, it's the
character.
fact that
And
she picks the youngest one,
I know,
but he kills the oldest one. Like that is,
it's
they
gonna be
basically killed them
brutal.
both. They might as well kill them both.
It's gonna be brutal.
Whew. Rough.
Maybe because the older one, but he's still. I guess we haven't seen. I'd have to go back and look to see if did we see them in season 1, like as little kids running around.
Yeah, I think so. Or at least from what I remember, she gave birth towards the end of the season. I had to rewatch. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, because it's still like they're both like pretty young. I mean, it's not like they're like teenagers or something. And of course,
no,
there has
yeah,
like
Makers.
no time takes place in between. Like, how we're done with the time skips.
Yeah, Maelor is young, like very young, because one of the reasons why people think she chose Maelor is because maybe he would be too young to understand what's happening.
Right. I mean, like if in Game of Thrones, like if Rickon were like, if you went by the actual book ages, Rickon would be like 3 getting shot. We don't we don't see that. Right. So by the time we actually see Rickon, because of the way, you know, it takes like seasons and seasons, he is like 12 when he gets shot.
Never
Right.
learned
So
how to
it's
strafe.
totally different. And even
Yeah.
that is still totally, even if they had done it to like a 3-year-old or something, like it's still like getting shot with an arrow is totally different than like getting your like throat
Decapitated in front of your own mother.
It's so, it gets so personal too, which is good. I think it's gonna be more brutal than the Red Wedding, because the Red Wedding is still war, and it's like pure chaos because everything's happening at once.
Well, one of the
And like,
things about the show that made Red Wedding so much more brutal, a little bit more drama, is the fact that Rob's wife was pregnant. Right. And they stab her in the stomach. It's pretty horrible.
Which does not happen in the books.
Yeah, honestly, I it's one of the many examples of where the show really went like full tilt over the edge, you know, where, and then it's funny because people say that stuff's in the book, and it's like, you obviously didn't read because it's not there. It's literally not there.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Some of it is, but no, yeah,
not the pregnancy. And she's also not killed, right, in the book. So I actually do think she might be pregnant in the books, to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know if she's pregnant or not.
Yeah. I that's one of the theories I like, but she's not murdered because her mom used her as a pawn essentially. But anyway,
they just they just turned into a random character in the show.
Yeah, and she, you know, it didn't follow any of the Lannister like lineage or any of that stuff. But regardless, I mean, it certainly has a chance to be the darkest moment in Game of Thrones television history.
Yeah, which is crazy to say.
Well, and it's also just going to depend on how they execute it, man. Like, it has to be done well. I think it will be, but I'm just saying, like, this is going to be like an artistic expression of grief and treachery and of despair, and like the way that they end up doing it and telling that story will tell us how memorable it will be, or how shocking or upsetting or whatnot, right? Because there's a million ways you could do it.
Yeah. Woo, it's gonna be brutal. That's all I'm gonna say. And for George to talk about it like that, because normally, like, George jokes about the red wedding sometimes, like, oh, I guess I don't do well going to weddings, and stuff like that. Like, even you can tell here, he's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of it's like, so that should be the ultimate signifier that this might be the most like HBO might get like roasted on social.
Oh, there's
media
going to be uproar. There's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're going with it.
And then from that point, it's just pure, gasoline on the fire, and we can expect escalations from there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he finishes out his blog post saying, "Hey, I'm back at work, and there's so much work to be done."
I mean, what a busy man. Goes to London, meets with the thing, about a play, meets with his publisher, goes to the set of this world he created. You know what I mean? Like, he does a lot.
Yeah, I would imagine. I think the best. If you look at some of these projects he has coming out, I would say Fire and Blood Part 2. I would say it coming out end of 2024, right? To go along with that play and before Dunk and Egg would be the best time for that to come out. I think you could hype the play a little bit because we'd get some of the Harrenhal. Because if he's going to expand on Harrenhal with this play, that's because other than that, I mean, Fire and Blood really just pulls from there wasn't really that much added to Fire and Blood of content that didn't already exist in the World of Ice and Fire and the novellas that he had already written, like The Princess and the Queen and stuff like that. I mean, some of it's literally like if you read the Aegon's Conquest chapter in Fire and Blood and you read Aegon's Conquest in World of Ice and Fire, it's literally the exact same thing.
Yeah, so, a lot of rehash material. Yeah.
So like half of Fire and Blood Part 2 is already written.
And right? I believe he had help with it, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember if he was the sole author on that or if Ilio and Linda had helped him out. But he certainly could use some of his assistance.
And if you, with Fire and Blood Part 2, you could actually, because you're just outlining stuff, you could sort of outline and give us more Dunk and Egg stuff, because that's actually probably going to be a pretty big part of it. And you could kind of put yourself in a position to be a little more done with that. So maybe that's what it was. Maybe he was talking a little bit about Dunk and Egg when he said, and A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah. And it's a huge opportunity. It really is. And I know a lot of people say, no, once you finish Winds, go work on A Dream of Spring. And I agree. But at the same time, I'm not going to, I think that would be wishful thinking to think he's going to dive right into book 7. And I don't know.
I'm still a big believer that book 7 is going to take way less time.
Well, also let's just put it.
They've also theorized that that one of the books is already done, and when he's talking about Winds, he's actually talking about Dream of Spring.
I don't buy that one. I don't.
He's going to be like, oh yeah, by the way, I actually finished. I like they're both done.
I would love for that to be the case, but I don't believe it at all. I will say this though: what if he meant for his publisher to talk about splitting Winds into 2 books?
I'd be fine with it.
Because we talked about that. We said, and he mentioned in the last blog post, the one before this, where he's like, maybe I should have written, or maybe it was an interview. Either way, he said, maybe I should have written smaller books. Like maybe I should have made them smaller. And we said, yeah, George, just make them smaller. Like split them in half, give a nice little resolution. And you're going to get more. Of course,
I think you could. I mean, if it ends up being 8, or you just want to call it part 1, part 2, I mean, because it sounds like he's already there. It sounds like he's actually. It sounds like he's past the halfway point of Winds.
Yeah, and he is definitely pushing the limits of binding at some point. I mean, Brandon Sanderson published like a 1,300-page mass market paperback, so anything's possible. But there is a point where you have to split them.
I say just turn it into 8 books. No one's gonna care. Like
I don't care. Yeah.
No one is going to care. The 7 is just sort of like a nice number as opposed to 8.
And so was 3 when he said that. And so was 5 when he said that. It's like whatever you need to be, bro.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like the odd numbers are great until you hit 7, and then it's kind of like
Yeah,
9
9.
is weird. 10, okay, but yeah. It's like 10 is better than 9.
I believe the
10 is
Expanse
actually better.
series,
10 is actually better than 8,
I
like the
think
way
the
I view it.
Expanse series is 9 books, which is weird.
Yeah,
Very
I know.
strange. Yeah, just
Yeah,
write one
so
more.
yeah, I mean, just split it up. I mean, there's nobody's gonna like because Feast is the smallest book, and it's still a great book. So just split it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else, Jimmy? I know this is kind of a trailer breakdown, some news. We were gonna do the outline, but I think we'll save that. Maybe we can do that next week. The Feast outline. It's kind of the holiday season, so we're kind of just filling the month of December anyway with
We're just
content.
getting a lot of news, dude. Like, there's a lot of stuff happening.
And we can another way you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, you got the House of the Dragon trailer. Then you get a George blog post where he's talking about the publisher and wins. I mean, I just haven't been this positive in a long time. It feels like ever since House of the Dragon season 1, we've just been getting news, and it feels great, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one day these times are going to be behind us. We're eventually going to get
Yeah.
wins, and then eventually, we're going to grow older, and George won't be around. Like, I cherish these episodes and these moments where we hear from him. It's great.